Alright, what is happening? Twitch and YouTube. So yesterday I did not stream because I was over at my grandmother's house and I basically spent the day there, and by the time I came back I was kinda tired from that. But I thought I'd catch up on articles because I went through them yesterday and there was quite a bit of articles available. So today will be an early stream to catch up on what I missed yesterday, and following that I would probably do another stream in the early afternoon. I'll probably put that out for 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. School kids will be coming back from school around 3 to 4, so I want to avoid that because my road will get quite rowdy, because there's a good couple of kids that lives in my road, especially around where my house is. So I'm not going to really waste much time and I'm just going to hop straight in. I will go over to the oldest article and then I'll work my way across this way, and then I'll do the video cards article. As for the video cards website, I didn't take many articles because they were already in Tom's Hardware, and Tom's Hardware does provide more information. I tend to go to video cards just for the articles that are out before Tom's Hardware releases them, or if Tom's Hardware does not cover those, then I take the video cards website. It's a shorter articles on that website, so it is better for a more streamlined approach, but I do want to keep myself informed with more information where possible. So starting off, AMD posts the highest Q1 result ever, strong CPU sales but GPU and gaming trail behind. AMD warns that US export tariffs may hit its sales. Alright, and late Tuesday, AMD announced its financial results for the first quarter of fiscal 2025, posting its highest quarterly revenue ever. The company's results were driven by sales of expensive client and data center CPUs, as well as improved sales of Instinct MI300 series AI accelerators. However, the company's gaming earnings dropped mainly due to the slowdown of console sales. But while the company's revenues in Q1 set records, AMD warned that the US export tariffs may hit its sales by around $1.5 billion in 2025. Now, it's no surprise that the tariffs will hit them, especially when the US is a major client of AMD, and it's no surprise that AMD CPUs in the data center space are their biggest source of revenue, because EPIC CPUs are, to be blunt, they are way ahead of the Xeon variants. And even if you don't need EPIC, there's always Threadripper, which is again better than Xeon. Now, I'm not sure of Intel's complete lineup of data center CPUs, and I'm not even entirely sure that I'm well informed of AMD's entire stack of data center CPUs, or even their supercomputers, but I'm confident enough that they are outperforming Intel in both efficiency and in raw performance. AMD posted a revenue of $7.438 billion for the first quarter of 2025, up 36% year over year. When it comes to earnings, this is the best quarter posted by AMD throughout its history. In fact, it is more than AMD earned for the whole year of 2019. AMD's gross profit totaled $3.736 billion US, whereas its net income achieved $709 million for the quarter, up a whopping 2.139% for the same quarter a year ago, as its gross margin hit 50%. So having a look at the numbers themselves, we can see that in terms of billion, it was 7.4 over 5.4, and the gross profit was 3.7 versus 2.5 in the same quarter of last year. The profit margin went up by 3%. The operational earnings went up by around 400 million, rounding up. The operating expenses versus revenue percentage went down by 7%. The operating income went up by, I wonder, this is probably missing a zero or another digit. No, but it's up by 2,000%, so I'm going to assume that 36 million was the operating income in 2024 Q1, and as of Q1 2025 it went up by 770 million US dollars. The operating margin is up by 10%. The net income of the company is up by 580 US million, and the diluted earnings per share went up by 0.37 US dollars, up 529% year on year, and that is huge gains for a 12-month period. In the data centers, the net revenue went up by 1.3 billion US dollars. The operating income went up by 400 million US dollars. The net revenue in client and gaming went up by 700 million US dollars. The operating income went up by around 250 million US dollars. In embedded industry, it actually went down by 20 million US dollars, and the operating income went down by 20 million US dollars. Okay, this is according to the CEO. We delivered an outstanding start to 2025 as year-over-year growth accelerated for the fourth consecutive quarter, driven by strength in our core businesses and expanding data center and AI momentum, said the chair and CEO of AMD. Despite the dynamic macro and regulatory environment, our first quarter results and second quarter outlook highlight the strength of our differentiated product portfolio and consistent execution, positioning us well for strong growth in 2025. In the first quarter, AMD's client and gaming division generated $2.9 billion US in revenue, reflecting a 28% increase compared to the same period last year. The client sub-segment contributed $2.3 billion US, marking a 68% rise year-on-year, largely fueled by high interest in the latest generation of Ryzen AI processors, and a product mix that included more premium parts such as the Ryzen 9000 X3D for desktops and the Ryzen AI 300 series for laptops. And having another look at another graph, this is very zoomed in from a previous stream. As of their revenue in the gaming segment actually decreased by $0.3 billion, but their client and data center revenue had increased by a whopping $900 million. The operating margins went up by 7%. Now this is likely due to the Zen 5 non-X3D CPUs not being much of an uplift from the Zen 4 CPUs, and this will probably generally just not flatten out, but it'll probably start picking up again, and the overall sales would likely start increasing as the Zen 4 stock starts to dry up, and as people upgrade their systems to the the AM5 platform. Now there is the chance that this is also due to their laptop sales not being up, because Strix Point was not it was not as much of an uplift as the Zen 4 laptops were compared to the Zen 3 laptops. And at the same time, the integrated graphics weren't anything to really make a big deal of, because fundamentally RDNA 3.5, as close to RDNA 4 as it might be, it still did not have a large uplift compared to the RDNA integrated graphics of the 780M chip. The 890M chip was not really substantially faster compared to the 780 chip versus the 680M chip. And that is likely due to bandwidth constraints, because adding more compute units didn't really make too much of a benefit. But I suspect that given a bandwidth increase, a wider memory bus, LPDDR5X, and you'll probably see a much more substantial uplift in performance, as well as infinity cache, because the APUs do not have any infinity cache in their GPU segments. And I can close this. We can continue. And in contrast, the revenue from gaming subsegment declined 30% to $647 million, mainly due to reduced contributions from AMD semi-custom system on chips for Microsoft Xbox and Sony PlayStation game consoles. Nonetheless, AMD expressed optimism from sales of its latest Radeon RX 9070 series graphics cards for desktop PCs based on the RDNA 4 architecture. Now that is something that I did not actually consider, that the Xbox and PlayStation sales also contributed to the gaming segment, because technically this is gaming, it's not consumer. Client is data centers, and then I don't think they include their consumer products in gaming. Let me have a look here real quick. So this does speak of Ryzen and Ryzen AI Max Plus. So it might have included all of those. But obviously there would be a decline in PlayStation and Xbox sales, because, to be frank, they are nearing the end of the generation. Obviously they probably have another 4 years in them, but regardless, the sales have long since tapered off, the first 2 years is probably the most money that any console will ever generate in terms of console sales for any console company. So it only makes sense that they would have reduced margins in terms of the Xbox and PlayStation console sales. AMD's data center division reported $3.7 billion in revenue in Q1 of 2025, reflecting a 57% rise compared to the same quarter last year. The sharp increase was primarily fueled by continued momentum in server processor, particularly the 5th generation of EPYC CPUs. Nonetheless, AMD says that sales of its Instinct MI300 series accelerators for AI also increased. Specifically, AMD highlighted new deployments of its AI GPUs with Core 42, Oracle, and Siemens. So over here we can have a look, and we can see the rise from 2.3 billion to 3.7 billion from Q1 of 2024 to Q1 of 2025. And in terms of operating margin, it went up by 2%, Q1 2024 being 23% and Q1 2025 being 25%. And we can close this. AMD's embedded products unit generated $823 million in the first quarter, a 3% decrease from the prior year. This decline reflected varied conditions across end markets, with some areas showing strength while others struggled. Specifically, the launch of the EPYC embedded 9005 processors, which are being integrated into IBM's latest storage systems and Cisco's high-end network security appliances, positively affected performance of the division. In addition, AMD also began shipments of Spartan UltraScale Plus FPGAs and second-generation Versal AI Edge SoCs. However, demand for other products was a mixed bag. Looking at the charts, we can see the 0.8 billion revenue of Q1 2024 versus the 0.8 billion revenue of Q1 2025, but it still was down by 3%, so the other decimals were not included. The operating margin of Q1 2024 was at 41%, while the operating margin of Q1 2025 was at 40%, and it's down by 1% primarily due to low revenue, according to the graph. Looking ahead to the second quarter of 2025, AMD anticipates revenue to be around $7.4 billion, around $300 million. However, the company's profitability is expected to be impacted by a one-time $800 million inventory-related charge tied to the recent imposed US export controls, which will lower the reported gross margin to around 43%. Without this adjustment, the gross margin would be around 54%. And that's an image of a related paragraph. And that brings us to the end of the revenue segment of AMD's Q1 post. There is one more article that I will cover, but I will be covering that a bit later. I'll be going in chronological order that I found the articles. So in Nvidia news, I think this is Nvidia news. No, it's not Nvidia news. I just thought based on the name it was part of an Nvidia architecture, but it's not. Ampere sneaks out a 192 core CPU with 12 channel DDR5 memory. And 12 channel would probably mean 24 DIMMs of DDR5. So Ampere Computing on Tuesday quietly added several new processors to its Ampere 1 family without a formal announcement or press briefings. The quiet release comes after the company was bought by SoftBank. The new Ampere 1 M CPUs feature a 12-channel DDR5 memory subsystem and are aimed at applications that require more memory capacity as well as bandwidth. The new CPUs feature from 96 to 192 cores and require new motherboards. The Ampere 1M CPU family uses 7228-pin FCLGA socket and includes 6 processors with 96, 144, 160, and 192 single-threaded custom ARM v 8.6 plus cores operating at up to 3.6 GHz and equipped with a 2 MB L2 cache. The CPUs also feature 64 MB of system-level cache. The key feature of the new CPUs compared to their predecessors is their 12-channel memory subsystem, which supports a maximum of 1 DIMM per channel and up to 3 TB of accessible DDR5 5600 megatransfers per second capacity. The memory subsystem is ECC protected using SEC DED and symbol ECC to make it suitable for cloud data center workloads. So I stand corrected on the RAM being 24 DIMMs. It is actually just 12 DIMMs. So over here we have the lineup being Ampere 1 A192-32M, features 192 cores, 3.2 GHz frequency and power draw of 348 watts. The Ampere 1 A192-26M features 192 cores, a frequency of 2.6 GHz and a power draw of 278 watts. The Ampere 1 A160-28M features 160 cores, a frequency of 2.8 GHz and a power draw of 262 watts. The Ampere 1 A144-33M features 144 cores, a frequency of 3.3 GHz and a power draw of 334 watts. The Ampere 1 A144-26M features 144 cores, a frequency of 2.6 GHz and a power draw of 239 watts. The Ampere 1 A96-36M features 96 cores, a frequency of 3.6 GHz and a power draw of 331 watts. Alright, on the I/O front, the processor supports 96 PCIe 5.0 lanes with bifurcation capacities down to 4x and has 24 device controllers to connect multiple accelerators, SSDs, network cards, and other high-performance components needed in AI and cloud deployments. Ampere's Ampere 1M processors are still made on TSMC's 5nm process technology, just like their predecessors, so the additional memory channels are indeed the key feature of the new CPUs. These processors can process up to 192 threads per socket, which is lower compared to AMD's 192-core EPYC 9965 CPUs, which support simultaneous multi-threading and therefore can process up to 384 threads simultaneously. But perhaps the purpose of Ampere 1M is not only to offer support for 3 terabytes of memory for interested parties in AI space, but rather to set the stage for the company's next generation Ampere 1 MX processors that will feature 256 cores and 12 DDR5 memory channels. This upcoming CPU will be made on TSMC's 3nm manufacturing process and therefore will add both features and performance efficiency to its list of advantages. And that brings us to the end of that article, and I think that it's very interesting to see that more companies in the data center space are employing more memory modules in their systems. And I think that's mainly due to AI workloads, because at the end of the day, while AI training does require a lot of compute performance, it also requires a substantial amount of memory, which is one of the reasons why Nvidia went over to the GDDR7 for its Blackwell architecture. And I suspect that the professional GPU supercomputers of Nvidia utilize GDDR7 3GB modules just so that they can have access to more VRAM. And I think that also comes with the Pro 6000 Blackwell professional GPU card of Nvidia having 96GB of GDDR7, because that would mean that it probably clamshelled 3GB modules, whereas if it didn't clamshell, it would have had 48 gigabytes of GDDR7, which would put it at around 48 divided by 3 is 16 memory chips that it has at its disposal. I think 16, right? I did that with mental math, so I might be a bit off. In any case, moving on to the next article. Reviews show AMD's RX 9070 GRE trails the RTX 5070 in raster performance. Ray tracing is on par with the 5070, and it's $50 cheaper than the 5070. And obviously the 9070 GRE is currently a Chinese exclusive card. However, similar to essentially every GRE card of AMD, it will likely get a later international launch. Moving on to the article itself. With the retail embargo lifting tomorrow, reviews of AMD's China exclusive RX 9070 GRE have gone live. Hardware publication EX Preview has published its review of a custom model from XFX, providing us with insight into the car's performance and where it stands versus the competition. Positioned as an intermediary between, I'm too tongue-tied to pronounce that, between the RX 9070 and the soon-to-be launched RX 9060 XT, the RX 9070 GRE is a series of hits and misses. It trails the RTX 5070 in rasterization, and its pricing really doesn't add to its value versus AMD's own RX 9070. Around 10 days ago, the RX 9070 GRE unexpectedly became available for pre-order across major Chinese online stores. AMD later officially confirmed the card, but it is currently region locked, with no word on when it might hit the global market. Under the hood, it carries a cut-down Navi 48 GPU wielding 3072 stream processors, which would constitute 48 compute units, roughly 25% fewer than the RX 9070 XT. It offers 12 GB of GDDR6 memory at slower 18 GB per second, but that is likely an artificial limitation. The GPU launched at $575. This is probably including the VAT of China. For context, the RX 9070 and RTX 5070 both debuted at $625 in China, again including VAT probably. Saving $50 means you'll be missing out on exclusives like RTX HDR, VSR, smooth motion, and multi-frame generation found on the RTX 5070, and the extra VRAM and compute power with the RTX 9070 that can enable 4K gaming. The RX 9070 GRE does not have an MBA made by AMD variants similar to other RX 9070 GPUs. The model under review is the XFX RX 9070 GRE Snowwolf, a pure white card with triple fan cooler and dual 8-pin connectors. Internally, the card is equipped with 20 GB of GDDR6 modules from Samsung, so you might be able to extract some performance gains by memory overclocking. That is possible, but however, in terms of gaming performance, your gains are not in your memory speed, but rather your memory capacity. And that is only if you are memory capacity limited. You find majority of your performance in your clock speeds and in your core count. Across a suite of games at 1440p, the RTX 5070 appears to be on average 5 to 10% faster than the RX 9070 GRE in raw rasterization performance. Based on our testing, we expected this to translate to 15 to 20% performance gap versus the RX 9070, expanding to almost 30% versus the RX 9070 XT. The RX 9070 GRE easily outperforms the RTX 5060 Ti, which is expected with the price difference between the two. What's interesting is the ray tracing performance, where the RX 9070 GRE appears to surprisingly keep pace with the RTX 5070 in a handful of titles. Now, it's very much set in stone that Nvidia fumbled the bag with Blackwell, and the ray tracing performance uplift was not as large as everyone was expecting, and this gave the perfect opportunity for AMD, through using machine learning for the first time in FSR, to catch up in both the upscaling aspect as well as the ray tracing aspect, by changing the way that the Radeon A4 architecture performs ray tracing. It is fundamentally different compared to Radeon A3 and I believe Radeon A3.5 respectively. And no one else is to blame but Nvidia for allowing that to happen. Over here's performance charts. I'm not really going to go through the performance charts. The 9070 GRE versus the RTX 5070, I'll go over the rasterized performance difference. Compared to the 5070, the GRE was 26% slower in Borderlands 3. In Forza Horizon 5 it was slower, it was faster by 0.74%, excuse me, in Borderlands 3. In Forza Horizon 5 it was slower by 9.79%, and in Assassin's Creed Shadows it was 8% slower. In Far Cry 6 it was 1.84% slower. In Cyberpunk 77 it was 10% slower. In F1 24 it was 0.53% faster. In Rainbow Six Siege it was 21.86% slower. In Black with Wukong it was 19.44% slower. And in ray tracing performance in Assassin's Creed Shadows, the GRE was on par with the RTX 5070 with no performance gap. The F124 has the RX 9070 GRE being 3.85% faster than the 5070. In Cyberpunk 2077, it is 12.2% slower than the 5070 in ray tracing. In Far Cry 6, the 9070 GRE is 1.41% faster than the 5070. Much of the same story repeats at 4K, where both GPUs are held down by their 12GB frame buffer. At idle, the specific 9070 GRE model draws 9.3 watts of power, jumping to 245 watts under load, with a peak of 317 watts. Good lord. Once adjusted for global prices, the 9070 GRE's MSRP translates to roughly $500 minus the 13% VAT. In a world where Arduino 4 GPUs were readily available, the RX 9070 GRE would have been another upsell for the RX 9070, which already acts as a stepping stone for the RX 9070 XT. Now, considering that, I would say that a $50 is a bit of an upsell to another GPU. However, at the same time, if prices are low enough, I'm not against a $50 gap. So for example, if the 9070 XT was truly available at $600, a $550 9070 non-XT would be justifiable in my eyes. A 9070 GRE at $500 would also be justifiable. A 9060 XT 16GB at $400, I don't think it's going to be $400, I think it's going to be $375 according to rumors. I think that it was $375, peaking up there in terms of MSRP suspicion on the Mosul is Dead YouTube channel. I don't think with a gap that large, I would say that you should segment it by $75 at that point. So if you have your $600 9060 GRE, I mean not 9060 GRE, 9070 XT, your 9070 non-XT would come in at $525 MSRP. The 9070 GRE would come down to $450. The 9060 XT would come down to $375, and then your 9060 would come down to $300. Now, something to make note of. I have a suspicion that there won't be a 9060. At least not for a bit. I think when they do release the 9060, they'll probably give it 12GB of GDDR6 VRAM. I think the 9060 will be a cut down version of the 9070 GRE with the same 192-bit memory bus. That's the suspicion that I have. If they go with a 9060, if they go with an 8GB 9060, it will be AMD showing their hand of the pure greed that they have in this generation, because an 8GB 9060 XT already did not leave a good taste in people's mouths, and as soon as they confirmed that and doubled down despite the distaste for that card, and the 5060 Ti 8GB, it showed a few of their cards in their hand. And if they are to release an 8GB 9060 non-XT, that would just be showing the entire hand to the consumers. Because while AMD was speaking about releasing a mid-range generation focused on competitively priced and competitively performing GPUs for Arduino 4, It's easy to say that it was a lie, and honestly, if they are to release a 9060 non-XT with 8 GB of VRAM, it'll be them showing their hand that they said what they said about focusing on mid-range, that's affordable, to be what it was, a manipulation of the consumers. That said, it's important to remember the RX 7900 GRE also launched with a steep $700 price tag in China before its global launch at $549. In any case, RX 9070 GRE GPUs along with pre-built systems from system integrators will be available for purchase tomorrow in China. So I suspect in a few weeks there'll probably be a hardware unboxed review eventually. Moving on to the next article. Tariffs could increase tech prices by up to 70% and reduce GDP by $69 billion nice, according to CTA report. Game consoles will be hit the hardest and laptops could increase in price by 34%. And that is not a good thing because people usually buy laptops because they are cheaper than buying a computer outright. And give me a few seconds, I have a message. Hang on. And there's going to be a package delivered to my house. Alright, so there might be a slight disturbance. But no matter. Let's jump into the article itself. So export tariffs enacted in April are expected to raise retail prices by 11% to 70% across different categories, but consumer spending cut consumer spending by $123 billion annually and shrink the US economy output by $69 billion, according to a report by Trade Partnership Worldwide published by the Consumer Technology Association on Wednesday. There are a couple of catches. The report, which evaluates how recent US tariffs will affect prices of 10 widely used technology products in the US, assumes that all tariffs will come into effect and that there will be full pass-through to retail buyers. Now that does make sense that the evaluated outcome will be the worst case scenario, because that's typically what you should aim for in your expectations, so that whatever extra you get is a nice to have, but you've prepared more than enough for any potential negative outcomes of a projection that you have. On April 2nd, the Trump administration introduced a tariff program under the International Emergency Economy Powers Act that included a 10% general rate on all imports and increases rates for 57 countries by between 11% and 50%. A 10% universal tariff went into effect on April 5th, while higher rates were applied to specific countries starting April 9th. A pause was placed on the evaluated country-specific tariffs on April 10th, though the baseline 10% tariff remained. On April 11th, electronics and semiconductor-based products were temporarily spared from these new tariffs. But a Section 323 probe into the broader electronic supply chain launched on April 16th brought renewed tariff risks, with early 25% duties already applied to materials such as aluminum and steel, as well as vehicles. Perhaps most importantly, tariffs on goods from China, except electronics, surged to 145%. And the article has a table, and I will just run through the potential increase in consumer prices percentage. I won't go into the actual numbers that's on here. Smartphones are to increase the price by 30.8%, on the consumer end, laptops and tablets by 34%, connected devices by 22.4%, computer accessories, man, I can't speak this morning, will increase by 24.8%, desktop computers will increase by 24%, video game consoles will increase by 69.4%, monitors will increase by 31.8%, speakers and headphones will increase by 22.3%, lithium-ion batteries will increase by 17.9%, and televisions will increase by 10.7% respectively. Excuse me. The TPW study modeled a scenario where the 90-day hold on tariffs ends in July and higher rates resume on affected goods. Products not complying with the US-Mexico-Canada agreement trade rules would face stacking tariffs, i.e. up to 50%, whereas Chinese goods could be hit with combined rates of 145%. The analysis covered batteries, client PCs, desktops and laptops included, displays, game consoles, tablets, TVs, headphones, and various computer accessories. And the rest is going over the numbers that I went over already. So that brings us to the end of that article. I'm going to cut it short, because the subsequent paragraphs go over percentages that are already covered and then some extra details into those. But yes, it is going to be a hit in the finances of many companies, but the companies that will be hit the worst are the companies that are much smaller in the US, and not only are they much smaller, they are also only selling in the US market. Those are the companies that will be hit the hardest, because they are the ones that get hit by the tariffs, obviously. The ones that are hit by the tariffs that sell internationally to other countries, excluding the US, will still be able to recoup some of the loss that they make in the US, meaning they don't have to make as substantial of an increase to the price. Moving on to the next article, we are slowly but surely chucking through this. We are at 50 minutes. And we still have a good amount of articles to go through. I think this is going to be a 2-hour morning stream, which would end me off at around 11 Central South African time. Standard South African time, excuse me. Raptor Lake instability saga continues as Intel releases 0x12F update to fix the Vmin instability. So microcode update 0x12F rectifies rare circumstances where a Vmin shift can still occur. Reports of Raptor Lake instability issues have been at an all-time low since Intel released firmware updates several months ago, but they're not completely gone. Intel released microcode update 0x12F last week to fix Vmin shift instability, an issue that was thought to have been fixed with previous microcode updates. The microcode update reportedly is an extension of the microcode update 0x12B, and it supplements 0x12B with additional fixes that weren't covered, specifically 0x12F. Specifically, 0x12F fixes a limited issue surrounding instability on Raptor Lake systems operating for multiple days in a row, running low activity, lightly threaded workloads. Intel confirmed that the microcode update does not incur on any additional performance penalties beyond what the previous microcode updates might have added. It clarified that the microcode update specifically applies to 13th and 14th generation processors and does not apply to Intel's latest generation Core Ultra 200S series processors, which have no known instability issues. Intel fixed majority of Raptor Lake's instability issues in September 2024 with mega firmware update 0x12B, which addressed several major issues causing chaos on affected chips. The update combined microcode update 0x12.5 and 0x12.9 and addressed elevated voltage requests by Raptor Lake CPUs during light activity or when idle. Prior to these firmware updates, many Raptor Lake chips were experiencing accelerated wear and tear, especially on the K series parts, due to extreme stress on the clock tree circuit inside the IA core and excessive high voltages and temperatures. Failure of the clock tree circuit would cause a shift in the clock duty cycle, leading to the system's instability and in many cases CPU death. Raptor Lake owners would have to wait long for BIOS updates to arrive with the new firmware update. Computer-based reports that some motherboard makers such as ASRock are already releasing BIOS updates with microcode update 0x12F. That's a very good thing to see that Intel is still on the ball with the microcode updates due to their poorly designed Raptor Lake and Meteor Lake CPUs. Not Meteor Lake, Raptor Lake and the Raptor Lake refresh CPUs. It was an unfortunate thing, but it was to be expected with the way that Intel was pushing voltages, wattage and temperatures on their CPUs. You can't push those components with that much voltage, that much power at such a high temperature for generations and not expect one generation to eventually decay in stability and decay in component health. Moving on to our next article. This article is something that I find very interesting due to the stacking of cache that AMD employs in its CPUs. And this would be 3D X-DRAM, which aims for 10x the capacity of today's memory. Neo Semiconductor's memory has up to 512 gigabits per module. So a modified 3D NAND process seeking to replace traditional DRAM has made its way into the news. So over here we can see the capacitor, over here the transistor channel, and this is just how it's supposed to look in a 3D space. And the Neo Semiconductor is once again announcing a new technology that hopes to revolutionize the state of DRAM memory. Today the company unveiled two new X3 man, I'm so used to saying X3D. Today the company unveiled two new 3D X-DRAM cell designs, 1T1C and 3T0C. The 1 transistor 1 capacitor and the 3 transistor 0 capacitor designs are expected to see proof of concept test chips produced in 2026 and will offer 10 times the capacity of normal DRAM modules. Based on Neo's existing 3D X-DRAM technology, the new cells are advertised as being able to hold 512 gigabits or 64 gigabytes on a single module, at least 10 times more than any modules currently commercially available. Neo's test simulations measures a 10 nanosecond read-write speed and over 9 minutes of retention time, both of which are also on the leading edge of current DRAM abilities. Thanks to a design based on indium gallium zinc oxide, a crystal material better known for its use in display technology, the 1T1C and 3T0C cells can be constructed like 3D NAND in a stacked design allowing for improved capacity through and throughput while remaining power efficient. The cells were designed as a modified 3D NAND process, with Neo hoping that existing 3D NAND manufacturing facilities can be quickly and easily upgraded to fabricate the new designs. With the introduction of 1T1C and 3T0C 3D X-DRAM, we are redefining what's possible in memory technology, said Neo's CEO. This innovation pushes past the scaling limitations of today's DRAM and positions Neo as a frontrunner in next-generation memory. While a CEO's comments will always be bullish on their while a company's comments will always be bullish on their company's features, the CEO may be correct with this one. The 1T1C design stands a much greater chance of becoming a true DRAM killer than Neo's previous innovations, such as the more decidedly niche technologies like 3D XAI tech, which per Neo only has a home in custom-built AI HPC machines. Neo Semiconductor is expected to share more about 1T1C, 3T0C, and the rest of its 3D XDRAM and 3D NAND families at IEEE and reset the rest of its 3D XDRAM and 3D NAND families at IEEE IMW this month. With companies and technologies like DRAM Plus based on FeRAM also fighting to become the next step in DRAM technology, and established vendors like SK Hynix content to develop ever bigger standard DRAM, 3D XDRAM has a hefty uphill battle to fight. Though the premise of 512 gigabit modules is attention grabbing, and that is very true. I am very curious to see where this technology would go in the future, and I am even more excited about the future of DRAM if this proves to be successful. Moving on to our next article. Windows 10 support is ending, but end of 10 wants you to switch to Linux. So I have been seeing a lot of articles about people switching over to Linux and the experience on it, especially what is it? SKUs such as Ubuntu. I have been looking into Linux Mint. I might make a switch to Mint. However, that would only happen in the near future. Now, part of my switch over to Mint would be its more simplistic design, and using Linux Mint would probably be a more mobile looking experience, which is something that I do want, especially when I put it on the mini PC, because if the mini PC is repairable, I will be switching over to the mini PC after it's repaired, and I will probably put Linux on it. I'll take Windows 11 off and put Linux on there. It's a Ryzen 6900HX CPU, and it has the 680M graphics integrated, but it also has Oculink, so by the time I am hopefully approved, not approved but licensed by the South African Nursing Council, I will eventually buy a 5070 Ti, and so the gaming performance decrease would probably not be as bad. However, I might get a 9070 XT instead, depending on the performance difference, because Linux Mint is supposed to be lighter than Windows, so there won't be as much of an overhead issue on the 6900HX, but I also want to do some investigation on the smart access memory when having a Ryzen CPU and a Radeon GPU at the same time. So depending on the performance uplift that I might see in that, I might just go for the RX 9070 XT and do the Smart Access memory route to boost some performance as well, and also just take a little bit of load off the CPU as well. That would all be part of what I would be investigating. But anyway, let's jump into the article. Microsoft is ending support for Windows 10 on October 14th, 2025. After that, there won't be any feature updates or security patches for your machine. The company has been pushing users to switch to devices that are ready for Windows 11, including its new Copilot Plus PCs. But a small group calling itself End of 10 has a different idea. Instead of switching to a new PC, switch away from Windows altogether. The team, which includes some people involved in the Linux community and KDE project, is pushing for people to install Linux on their Windows 10 PCs, or to find someone with technical expertise to help. End of 10 is pushing some standard arguments against Windows, including that Linux doesn't have as or telemetry, but it's also pointing out that throwing away all of these Windows 10 laptops will create e-waste, and that keeping a functioning device longer is usually an effective way to reduce emissions. That is very much true. In fact, I need to take the monitors of my old laptops and not recycle them, but reuse them in external PCs, not PCs, external monitors, through a conversion, and then take the laptops themselves and then take them to a recycling station. Thank you so much for saying my character looks cool. To be fair, I drew it like a while ago, and yeah, I drew it myself on my tablet. The thing is that the drawing, I had many iterations of the drawing itself, right? And to be fair, I spent many times scrapping many designs, but the overall, like the hair, the expressions, the muscular build, all of that was already set in stone. It was just refining my art style. Not a professional artist, but I do some art for myself. I typically do like I would go back to like Dragon Ball Z episodes and take screenshots and just redraw some of the bad scenes, because man, it used to irk me how Dragon Ball Z's art style would go from being good to going like complete terrible. You're a full-time. That's cool to see that you're a full-time artist, actually. Like, I'm not good enough to be on a professional level, but I do admire a lot of artists that are in the professional space. And at one point in my life I did decide to do that, but ultimately life took me down the nursing route, which I'm currently not working yet because I'm waiting for the regulatory body to provide the licenses for everyone in my year. So for now I'm just a sitting duck and streaming. Just to have a look at the rest of the article. So by at least one estimate by Canalys, 240 million PCs aren't ready to upgrade to Windows 11 based on the hardware requirements. There's also a compelling fiscal argument. Installing a free open source operating system on your old PC is definitely cheaper than buying a new machine. End of 10 suggests that most people should be able to install Linux on their own, though it doesn't make distribution recommendations, instead suggesting that you search for Linux distributions for beginners to find one. If you don't have that knowledge or confidence, the group is promising that Linux community is there to support you. Oh man, Linux probably has one of the best support communities in terms of a Reddit community for an operating system. I mean, I've been looking in Mint, and I am very interested in going over to Linux Mint as soon as I repair my mini PC. By the way, just asking, do you need anything for your channel? Like, I was searching for some clients. These AI bots and scammers are ruining the market. At the moment, I don't really need anything for my channel. I'm literally just starting out, so at the moment I don't need anything commissioned or anything like that. Probably in the future I will look into that, but for now I just want to grow the channel a bit more, and for a while it probably won't be monetized at all, so I won't be able to pay for anyone to do anything anyway. But probably in the future, once when I'm actually working and the stream picks up more, I'll probably start investing more money into it. But for now, it's just not a good financial move to spend a lot of money at the start of any sort of business venture, be it a hobby or an actual full-time business venture that you have. It's just not financially feasible, because things might not work out. Like streaming might just not work out for me and I'll have to quit. I was just thinking about your panels, like you have something to add to your channel. I don't have anything yet, so I haven't been like focusing on the appearance of the channel for now, because what I want to do is I want to get these streams to be on a more engaging aspect, because at the end of the day, if the content itself is good, it doesn't really matter how it looks to a viewer, because the viewer will watch. Sure, it will not be the best experience for the viewer, but the viewer will still be interested in the content if the content's good. So I first want to focus on my actual streams to be more, well, engaging and entertaining or informative to a viewer before I focus on any appearances or any functions of the stream. But it is something that I will do in the future if things do pick up. The site features a list of shops and tech collectives that say that they're willing to help with Linux support, but as of this writing, the vast majority of the 43 listed places are in Germany, with most others sprinkled elsewhere throughout Europe. There's a similar case in a section filled with events dedicated to helping to install and teach Linux, and I would be looking into that in the future. End of 10 isn't the only organization switching to Linux. Some computer charities are also giving it a shot to give people in need laptops that might otherwise end up in landfills. Windows 11 has some strict system requirements, including 8th gen core or more recent Intel processors and AMD Ryzen 2000 or higher processors, and a selection of Qualcomm chips. Newer AI-focused Copilot Plus laptops using chips with NPUs, including the Intel Core Ultra 200V series, AMD Ryzen AI 300 chips, and Qualcomm Snapdragon X, X Plus, or X Elite. They also require at least 16 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage. The Windows 11 only requires 8 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. It's still going to be a while before Linux is more widely adopted, but with the way Windows is pushing things, it will eventually be a good enough competitor. I think that's not going to cost you much. If you think about it, like $10 to $15 per panel, it'll add more attraction. That's true, but I'm currently a broke college student. Well, not a broke college student, I'm no longer a college student, I'm out of college. So I basically have like no money, and I haven't been working either. But probably in the near future I will do that. I will invest a bit more money as soon as I start working. But I'm currently in the waiting period of nursing in South Africa, where all your documentation following the completion of your nursing course is sent to the South African Nursing Council, and you are a sitting duck until the Nursing Council provides you your licensing to be able to practice in South Africa. But until then, I am but a broke, unemployed man. But when that time comes, I will probably look into making the channel look more attractive, because I'll have the money at my disposal. I'm fortunate enough to be able to live with my parents and not work until I'm licensed. I know many people don't have that luxury, but I do, and when I am working, I'll be spending a lot of time working. I'll probably be doing like, what is it? Not 48 hours, it will probably be somewhere around 60-hour weeks I'll probably be doing. So I will have the money to be able to spend on artists, and probably on a bit more product services to improve the streaming experience. But for now, I will just I'll just keep the way I am right now, and hopefully I'll reach a point where the stream is more engaging, that it would really just justify it being more attractive to an audience. Toshiba says Europe doesn't need 24 terabyte HDDs with witholds beefy models from the region. And I just wanted to look at this because I am looking to build a NAS when I'm working eventually. Now, unlike its industry peers, Toshiba has a rather convoluted way of introducing new hard drives. The company first unveiled them globally and only then launches them to the American and European markets. However, with 24 terabyte versions of N300 and N300 Pro HDDs, things became even more complicated, as the company says that it has no plans to launch 24 terabyte drives to Europe due to a lack of demand. We are currently observing a manageable demand for NAS hard drives with 24 terabyte storage capacity on the European market, a statement from Toshiba published by Computer Base reads. Against this background, we will not be launching the N300 24 terabyte model on the European market for the time being. We continuously analyze the market development and regularly validate our decision on the basis of current need assessments. For now, 24 terabyte hard drives are the highest capacity hard drives that Toshiba can offer. The company already offers nearline MG100 series 24 terabyte HDDs in the US, Europe, and Asia. However, the company only lists 24 terabyte N300 and N300 Pro HDDs, which could be among the best HDDs today in America, Asia, and the UK, but not in mainland Europe. In contrast, both Seagate and Western Digital sell their 24 terabytes and 26 terabyte hard drives for NAS in mainland Europe, though such HDDs seem overpriced there. Given both Toshiba's rivalry Given that both Toshiba's rivals readily offer the highest capacity products in Europe, it's hard to imagine that there is no demand for 24 terabyte NAS-oriented HDDs in the region. However, there might be more elaborate strategy in place for Toshiba. The Japanese HDD maker might be more interested in shipping its highest capacity models to the US and its partners there, as this market is more important for the company. Toshiba may also attempt to ship as many high-end HDDs to its American stock as possible before the country-specific tariffs kick in this July to grab some extra market share. If this is the case, we might see lowering shipments of other high-capacity Toshiba HDDs to mainland Europe, as the company might be stockpiling them for its American customers in the US. Still bear in mind that we are speculating and Toshiba hasn't communicated its strategy in detail. So with this, for a NAS, I am looking at a potential 72 terabyte NAS at most. It'll probably be between 48 and 72 terabytes that I'll settle on. I'll probably start on 48 terabytes and upgrade in the future. It'll probably be a mini NAS, or it'll be a mini ITX system that I turn into a NAS, which I'll probably turn into a build video if I'm being completely honest. I'll probably go with Western Digital. I am a Western Digital fanboy when it comes to storage devices. I tend to not go with brands like Corsair and any other consumer gaming brands when it comes to storage devices. Intel XeSS 2 expands support to 10 new games. XeSS surpasses the 200 game milestone as well. And this is cool to see because at the end of the day, XeSS is still better than FSR 3.1, and FSR 3.1 is still more utilized than FSR 4. And FSR 2 is honestly, in some cases, slightly better than FSR 4, depending on the application and how it's applied to a game. Intel has announced that its AI-powered upscaling tech XeSS is now available to over 200 games, while the newer XeSS 2 has been added to 10 more titles. As promised, the new Assassin's Creed Shadows, Civilization 7 are getting support for XeSS 2 along popular titles including Naraka Blade Point, Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, and Delta Force Black Hawk Down. Notably, Intel lists a total of 13 XeSS 2 enabled games on its website. However, according to PC Gaming Wiki, it is supported in over 20 titles introduced alongside the ARC B580 and B570 GPUs late last year. XeSS 2 offered support for only a handful of games up until today. Leveraging the Battlemage architecture, XeSS 2 combines upscaling, frame generation, latency reduction to compete with rival technologies like Nvidia's DLSS and AMD's FSR. As of now, XeSS 2 is fully compatible with only Intel Arc A series and B series discrete GPUs and integrated graphics found in the newer Intel Core Ultra processors. In its announcement, Intel has shared some performance data using its Arc B580 GPU to showcase the capabilities of XeSS 2. According to the company, Diablo 4 saw up to a 4x increase in frame rates, jumping from 46 FPS in 1440p native resolution to 186 FPS using XeSS 2. Similarly, games like Assassin's Creed Shadows, Delta Force, Black Hawk Down, Hogwarts Legacy, and F124 witnessed over 2x improvements in performance. And looking at this, does this include? It does not include frame generation. I suspect that they are talking about frame generation included. This is in 1440p using XeSS 2. The jump seems too large for it to not have some form of frame generation. Because with a jump this large, I'm expecting at least some form of frame generation, if not in every second frame, if not in between every frame, but maybe in every second frame maybe, or something like that. Because this jump is just, this leap in performance is way too high to just be machine learning upscaling. But at the end of the day, it's cool to see that Intel is rolling out more support for the Battlemage GPUs, as scarce as they are in the market and as low as their market share is. They still need to ensure that their feature set is competitive with AMD and Nvidia, but at this point in time their main competitor is AMD. AMD is still a mid-range to budget option for gamers, and if Battlemage can steal from that market share, Battlemage will be able to make a much larger name for Intel. But the stock is low and there is no confirmation of a more powerful consumer GPU coming from Intel this generation. So hopefully the APUs in the Celestial architecture will be powerful enough to drive APU sales up, as well as low-end gaming GPUs. XeSS 2 is also supported on a select Intel Core Ultra mobile processors that feature new integrated ARC GPUs solutions. Intel claims that the Core Ultra 9 285H processor with the Intel Arc 140Ti GPU can offer up to 40 FPS in various titles, with many surpassing 60 FPS. That might be a huge increase, but it does make them more playable, especially on laptops without discrete GPU. In Marvel Rivals running at 1080p with high settings, frame rates jumped from 23 FPS to 66 FPS using XeSS2, which is a 187% uplift, while Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii went from 32 FPS to 96 FPS. Now with jumps like that, that is why I'm suspecting a formal frame generation being included in that XeSS2. XeSS2 also includes a feature called Xe Low Latency, which helps to reduce input lag and improve responsiveness. In Intel's tests across Marvel Rivals, F124 and Assassin's Creed Shadows, XeLL lowered latency by an average of 45%, making it particularly useful in fast-paced competitive multiplayer games. While Intel still lags behind Nvidia and AMD in terms of overall adoption and GPU ecosystem maturity, the company's ongoing investment in XeSS shows promising progress. It's encouraging to see Intel offering viable upscaling and performance boosting alternatives, especially in the entry-level and budget GPU segment. At the moment, they are a low-end entry-level brand with their Battlemage GPUs. They are not in any way, shape or form mid-range. They would probably be low mid-range if they have a B770 released, but I doubt the B770 will be released because so far I haven't seen any news or any leaks from sources like Moore's Law is dead of another Battlemage consumer GPU being released. It's all just been pretty quiet on that end. But what I think the future of Intel graphics is, like I've said before, it's in APUs. If they can strengthen their APUs to be strong enough to cancel out low-end GPUs, like if they can have an APU that performs on par with a, let's say, a 3058 gigabyte, but it has access to more RAM, obviously, then it won't be RAM limited, it will just be rasterized performance limited, then that would be a huge jump in the market share and the adoption of technologies like XeSS2 and XeLL. And XeLL is only there for the frame generation aspect, because the problem with frame generation is that it doesn't increase the latency. The latency just remains. Okay, so with old frame generation, it was an increase in latency, but fundamentally the latency was technically, if you had a base FPS of 60 and you frame gened 120 FPS, you would see 120 FPS but with the latency of 60 FPS, and it will feel like 60 FPS latency. And if you're used to 120 FPS, you would feel the difference in the latency between the two. Moving on to the next article, we have two more Intel related articles. Intel Raptor Lake processors bottleneck PCIe 5.0 NVMe SSDs by 16%, limiting peak speeds to 12 gigabytes per second instead of 14 gigabytes per second. I have no idea what could cause this. My suspicion of the CPU overhead issue was due to Battlemage relying more on the CPU's performance on an architectural level compared to other GPU generations. Latency issues surrounding Intel's Core 200S series CPUs affect M.2 storage ports on LGA 1851 motherboards, leading to reduced performance. The SSD review reports that Arrow Lake CPUs have a bottleneck on the PCIe lanes dedicated to the motherboard M.2 slots, causing a roughly 2 GB per second bandwidth reduction compared to previous gen motherboards when using the fastest and best SSDs available. So when testing for this, I wonder if they're also testing if the GPU bandwidth is also negatively impacted, because it might just be a PCIe controller issue that might be happening, or something in the chipset that's either malfunctioning or it's not spec'd to take advantage of the PCIe 5 speeds. The storage-focused review outlet initially discovered the flaw during testing when a 14 GB per second capable PCIe 5.0 SSD only achieved 12 GB per second in an Arrow Lake-based test rig. After reaching out to board makers and Intel, it was found that the issue is Arrow Lake specific. The review outlet has been unable to confirm any Z890 motherboards operating PCIe 5.0 SSDs at speeds beyond 14 GB per second, whereas previous gen Z790 boards have no problem meeting the maximum speeds. The review outlet demonstrated the aforementioned issues with Samsung 1900 Pro and Micron 4600 SSD paired to two systems running Z890 Arrow Lake and Z790 Raptor Lake motherboards. With the Z890 motherboard, the Samsung and Micron SSDs peaked at 12.3 GB per second and the board's primary, secondary M.2 slots. Both SSDs reached speeds of up to 14.3 GB per second on the Z790 motherboard. Furthermore, the review outlet tested both SSDs on an Asus Hyper M2 add-in PCIe card and found both devices could achieve 14.3 GB per second. Confirming the issue only affects bandwidth on the physical M.2 slots on the Z890 motherboards. Although the subsequent read-write performance improved, random performance remained behind the levels observed on older Z790 motherboards, indicating the latency issue persists even when bypassing the M.2 slot. Further analysis confirmed that such performance limitations were not isolated to any specific motherboard maker. Asus and ASRock replicated the results independently and explained that the issue originates from the latency introduced by the I/O extender component in Intel's new multi-chip processor layout. So this is on an architectural level. This bizarre performance issue is allegedly a problem with Intel's interconnect on its latest Arrow Lake-based processors, resulting in unusual latency behavior among the chip's PCIe lanes. So it is a PCIe lane latency overall, like I thought it would be. Intel's Core Ultra 200S series processors for desktops feature 24 PCIe lanes, 16 PCIe 5.0 lanes for add-in graphics cards, 4 PCIe 5.0 lanes for SSDs, and 4 PCIe 4.0 lanes for SSD. The first 16 PCIe lanes are controlled directly by the SoC tile of Intel's Arrow Lake S CPUs, however PCIe lanes 21 through 24 are routed through the I/O extender tile, which adds latency and lowers the peak bandwidth. Intel can confirm that PCIe lanes 21 to 24 PCIe Gen 5 root port on Intel Core Ultra 200S series processors may exhibit increased latencies compared to the PCIe lanes 1 to 16 Gen 5 root ports, owing to a longer die-to-die data path. A statement by Intel published by SSD Review reads, however, any variations are contingent upon the specific workload and the capabilities of the PCIe endpoint device. So this is similar to the CCD to CCD latency that AMD had with the Zen 1 release, and that the Zen Plus refresh that they had. And this is probably due to the tile base that Intel uses that's it's not exactly the same as the CCD difference of AMD, but at the same time it has its similarities and the effects in terms of its latency. But also it comes with the benefits of being able to reuse tiles on different components as well, which at the end of the day it does save waste, and it does maximize the utilization of the components that Intel is manufacturing at Intel Foundry. This is now the second major performance-related issue affecting Raptor Lake processors. Intel's transition from monolithic die design to chiplet-style design with Raptor Lake has been widely known to affect gaming performance compared to previous generations of Intel processors. For instance, we found that Intel's generation Core i9-3900K and Core i9-4900K flagships are significantly faster than the Core Ultra 9-285K gaming workload on average. Intel has provided firmware updates since our review to help alleviate gaming performance, elevate gaming performance, but even with these updates, the chips still struggle to compete against previous gen Raptor Lake predecessors in gaming scenarios. Now that NVMe-based storage drives are having similar issues, it appears Intel's firmware development team has more work to do to rectify Raptor Lake's performance regressions. Primarily caused by the architecture switch to chiplet-style design, it doesn't appear that Intel can fix these issues with firmware, so we'll likely have to wait for Intel's next generation parts before these issues are fixed. And I think that Intel will probably have a Zen Plus moment with their next generation, because their next generation would likely be focused on improving the latency between the various tiles that they have on their CPU dies. And I hope they don't make the same mistake that AMD tried with Radeon A3 and tried to make a chiplet-based GPU with one of their GPU generations, because Radeon A3 massively under-delivered on its performance. Every GPU that they released was named a tier above of what it should have been. Nvidia can say the same thing, minus the 5090. The 5080 was not the 5090, excuse me, the 4090. The 4080 was fine where it was placed, but the 5070 Ti was where there was issues, because naming the 12GB 4080 the 4070 Ti was the biggest mistake that Nvidia could have done, because that card was specifically designed with specs of a non-TI 70 class card. But unfortunately they released it as a TI and had the subsequent super refresh of the Ada Lovelace generation, and we are suspecting a Blackwell super refresh to also happen with the what I suspect to include the 60 class card and 70 and 80. The 70 Ti I never saw any rumors or any videos or articles pointing towards a 70 Ti super release, but I don't think it needs one. What I think needs a super is the 70, 90i, the 60 Ti and the 60. The 5080 super would also require a super release. The 5080 would require a super release purely for the VRAM longevity, because 16GB at that performance tier is not enough for the future of that product. That product will reach end of life due to VRAM capacity much sooner than something like a 5070 Ti would. And the even the 5070, I don't think it needs 18GB if it uses the 3GB GDDR7 chips. What I think it needs is it needs a 15GB VRAM buffer. It can just utilize around, what is it, five of the chips for the GDDR7 3GB modules, and the 5060 Ti and the 5060 non-Ti respectively will get 12GB each. And it's my suspicion that from the very beginning Blackwell was supposed to, and I think Moore's Law is dead, even went over that, where they wanted to use 3GB modules for Blackwell GPUs, but it wasn't readily available on a consumer level at that point, and they had to settle for the 2GB modules, but their professional cards and their data center supercomputers do utilize the 3GB module of the GDDR7. And it wasn't so much the price of it was just the availability. They couldn't get the availability of it. And that's probably why the stock of Blackwell GPUs are so low, because they are trying to get the launch so that they can say, look, we launched the product on time, and they just have the refresh with the intended specs in probably Q4 2025, because on Moore's Law is dead, they went over some reports that Nvidia is gearing board partners to release not release, but at least announce a super variant of the 5070 and the 5080 respectively by the end of 2025. So we might see a 2026 launch at Computex 2026. We might see an announcement at that point, and hopefully the stocks are much better with the retailers when it comes to the super launch. And it will also help that the initial purchasing group has already purchased at least majority of what would have been the GPU market that they were going to sell to. Already went over this one. And this is the second article about AMD's financial report that I wanted to go over. So after projecting losses of $1.5 billion US, AMD CEO Lisa Su calls for a balance between export controls and national security. So just a day after AMD took an $800 million US inventory charge because of the US export controls and projections of a $1.5 billion US total loss, the company's chief executive Lisa Su said that there must be a balance between the US export controls on advanced processors and national security. China is the world's largest market and represents massive opportunities for American companies. Furthermore, if US companies leave it, local entities will develop standards that compete with American ones. And this can be seen with the Huawei company. I've went over articles. I think there was 2 articles that I went over on separate streams, where Nvidia CEO Jensen went over the topic of China and not providing China with the top of the line AI compute I think it's the supercomputers, but the AI chips, the top of the line AI chips to China, is leading to Huawei, a Chinese company, being quite frankly hot on the heels of Nvidia in terms of performance. Now, as far as power draw, they are not nearly as efficient yet, but it's only a matter of time before that happens, and I think they are one generation away of having completely caught up with Nvidia in the AI compute space. And Jensen Huang has already said that. He already went over that. In both articles he went over that, and he said that Huawei is right behind Nvidia, and he was expressing to Donald Trump that America can't deny China the highest end AI compute chips for too long, because it will only be a matter of time before China produces its own competitor, and when it produces its own competitor, it will probably be able to export said competitor to international spaces, and not only export them but probably compete at a lower price point, because at the end of the day Chinese labor is cheaper. Chinese working conditions are also worse than American working conditions, and they're able to get away with that and make much more greater margins and get away with much lower prices for their products. That's one of the reasons why Chinese sales are always so high in terms of their markets. There should be a balance between export controls and national security, as well as ensuring that we get the widest possible adoption of our technology, the CEO said in an interview with CNBC. That is a good thing for US jobs in the US economy. Last week, Jensen Huang, chief executive of Nvidia, had a similar message for US lawmakers. Nvidia currently holds a dominant position in the global AI computing landscape due to its CUDA software ecosystem and widespread deployment of its hardware in the US, Europe, and China. However, the CEO warned that the US export restrictions on advanced AI processors could severely weaken Nvidia's global influence and accelerate the rise of competing ecosystems, especially in China. Companies like Huawei, Biden Technology, InnoSilicon, and more threads are developing capable AI processors, and Huawei in particular has built a full-stack alternative to CUDA called CANN, which is designed for its Ascend processors and Cloud Matrix 384 systems. While these rivals currently face usability and compatibility challenges, their position is expected to strengthen if US firms are locked out of key markets. AMD is a significantly smaller player on the AI market than Nvidia, and therefore will not suffer from the ban on sales of American processors to China as extensively as its bigger rival. Nonetheless, AMD is considered a strong contender for becoming a big AI player, so it clearly will affect the strict US export rules. More importantly, just like Nvidia, AMD promotes American AI technology standards, so its absence from Chinese or European markets will help competing standards to establish and thrive, eventually threatening American dominance in the AI sector. And I think I went over that, and there was a comment that even pointed it out, is that just because you deny another country your most powerful technology doesn't mean that you would weaken that country in the technological space, because now you are feeding into the drive to become independent of your product, that you are restricting that country, and that country will eventually manufacture a competitive technology and probably even export it at a cheaper price. And that is something that was gone over in the comments of one of these articles on Tom's Hardware, especially pertaining to the comments of Jensen when he went over the growth that Huawei has been making in the AI space. And it went along the lines of, while these bans it's not the CHIPS Act, but it's one of the acts that prevents the top of the line compute devices being shipped to certain countries that are banned, like China, which is why we have products like the 5090D. But there is an article we'll cover of the 5090D actually halting exports to China, but I'll get to that in a moment. Where it's a short-term gain but a long-term loss that will be made by the US if they are to continue with the act of denying China its most powerful AI chip that it has available. Moving on to the next article. And the time now, it's almost 11, so I'll have to wrap up soon. but thankfully the next few articles might probably be on the smaller side. Nvidia reportedly halts 5090D deliveries in China, under-delivered orders cancelled, and a GPU ban is speculated. So the US recently lowered the bar for AI chips that required export licenses, meaning specialty chips like the Nvidia H20, which surprisingly still sells well despite being defanged, are no longer legal to sell in China. That has led to rampant speculation that the RTX 5090D will also be included in the ban, even though its AI performance was reduced by 23% from the full-flat RTX 5090. And it also lost other features like multi-GPU configuration. Unfortunately, this ban seems to be the case as popular hardware leaker HXL shared a WeChat post on X, formerly Twitter, reporting Nvidia's cancellation of the 5090D orders. According to the original post, which is machine translated, Nvidia has basically confirmed that the RTX 5090D series GPUs cannot be ordered in Q2. All orders for 5090D chips that have been placed and under-delivered POs have been temporarily cancelled, which means that RTX 5090D has been officially banned from sale. Channelgate Vision Conversion posted on the WeChat official account's platform, suggesting that it is a Chinese business or news outlet. Even though the 5090D has reduced performance versus the RTX 5090, Chinese manufacturers still use the former to build systems for AI training. We've seen a blower-style RTX 5090D leak on Bilibili with the same GB202 chip found on the RTX 5090 and 32GB of GDDR7 VRAM. So it's likely that when the White House lowered the performance threshold on the ban, this GPU was also affected. However, Nvidia has made an official hasn't made an official statement yet regarding the discontinuation of the RTX 5090D. Aside from that, the statement said temporarily. So there is a chance that Team Green is still negotiating with the US government to allow it to continue selling 5090D, or at least liquidate its remaining stocks. The CEO of Nvidia reportedly spent $1 million to join a presidential dinner at Mar-a-Lago in early April, where he was supposedly able to secure a suspension on the Nvidia H20 ban that was set to go live that month. Despite that, the White House went ahead with the export restrictions, which led Nvidia writing off $5.5 billion in lost sales and other opportunities. Oh, that tax return is going to look very, very sad when they see it. Nvidia has many opportunities here. In name it 5090 Lobster Edition, and then smuggling editions. This is a reference to computing chips being smuggled through live lobsters and baby bumps into China. It's sad to see, but hopefully the 5090D becomes an international product then, because I think the 5090D would probably make good money, because there's still a lot of people, and the dog's going crazy. There's probably someone in the road that doesn't belong here. Because the 5090D, while being cut down over 5090, a lot of people still prefer our size performance, so they'll probably buy a 5090D. The only thing that they probably would be wary of is the power connector melting. And that might be the only thing that keeps them from ever buying it, but outside of that, they'll probably buy it. Another thing would probably be the power draw itself. They might not have a CPU capable of delivering enough power, but most people overspec their CPUs, and in my opinion, by too much. Because I see people, they have like 10-year-old PSUs, and I don't trust any PSU manufacturer to keep me or my components safe for 10 years. I would probably upgrade a PSU every 6 to 8 years probably. And I would do that just for pure safety reasons, because a GPU dying, a CPU dying, a motherboard dying, your RAM dying, or your storage dying, that's fine. That can honestly, it'll hurt if it dies, but it won't hurt as much as your power supply causing a fire and either burning your room, part of your room, or even your entire house down if you left it running while you were away from the house and there's no one at home. So there's a chance that you can have catastrophic damage, and I would prefer to not let that happen, and I would rather let my smaller components that can cause less catastrophic damage to die if I had to pick a poison. Would I go over this? This is a short article, so I might as well. Well, to be fair, it's not really something I'm particularly interested in. I can close that. And Intel releases Arc Battlemage professional GPUs for Computex variants with 24 GB of VRAM alleged. So this is probably the suspected B770 that people have been talking about, but to my knowledge it is a B580 with 24 GB of VRAM, and I've seen people they were like they would buy it, and my response to people who say that is, you are wasting your money doing that. If you are in an environment that requires high amounts of VRAM, you are better off buying a more powerful CPU and just getting a ton of DDR5. In that case, in most circumstances, you would be better off doing that if you are VRAM sensitive. But if it's for gaming, you are better off getting the actual B580 12 GB. You'll be much better off getting that instead of a 24 GB version of that card. And since this is a pro version, it won't have the same driver support in gaming, so it will perform worse. Intel is gearing up to launch new Arc Professional GPUs, but there is a teaser strongly suggesting these will be based on the firm's latest Battlemage Xe2 architecture. Set to debut at Computex, these GPUs should at minimum offer a slight increase in memory capacities. Specifications and other technical details remain unknown, but we can expect to learn more from Intel at Taipei. Intel's Battlemage family currently employs one die BMG G21 powering both the Arc B570 and B580 GPUs. Rumors have alluded to several other configurations, and the most persistent being the larger BMG 31 die, which has surfaced numerous times in shipping manifests. The majority of these shipments are destined for Vietnam, which is home to several OSAT companies that assemble, package and test silicon. Export data alone isn't enough to confirm whether a BMG G31 based SKU is still being developed. So we're treating this one with significant skepticism, as would I, because I trust Moore's Law is data as a source, and Moore's Law is data has continuously pointed towards the B580 being the most powerful GPU for the Battlemage generation on the consumer front. And to reiterate that, most of the high-end Battlemage was cancelled. The Battlemage chips of the mid-range was also cancelled, and this is low-end Battlemage that we're talking about right now with the B580 and B570. Rumors of Battlemage professional cards with 24 GB of VRAM have been afloat since last December. Likewise, a recent slip-up from an OEM indicated that Intel had a 24 GB B580 model in the pipeline. If we put two and two together, at least one GPU from Battlemage professional lineup is expected to employ BMG G21 die with 12 16 gigabyte GDDR6 modules arranged in a clamshell configuration. Other specifications should remain largely similar to ARC B580. It's important to remember that Intel's BMG G21 die is still positioned as a low-end offering, designed to compete in the same segment as Nvidia's 4060 AD107 with just 20 execution Xe cores, 2560 shaders. Cards based on this design are unlikely to match RTX Pro 4000 Blackwell, at least in compute, with a similar 24GB configuration but a much more powerful GB203 chip under the hood. But for purely VRAM capacity-bound tasks dealing with high-resolution textures, scientific imaging, and inferencing LLMs, large language models, Intel's Battlemage Pro series has the potential to offer superior price-to-performance ratio. That will depend on what Intel's price tags are. And the price of dropping out of the enthusiast segment was also visible with AMD, with rumors suggesting the upcoming RDNA 4-based Radeon Pro W9000 GPUs will see a decrease in VRAM from 48 to 32 gigabytes. With the rumored 24GB BMG G21 GPU, Battlemage Pro looks strong on memory capacity. The big question is whether Intel will offer a higher performance option with compute heavy tasks, possibly with a model based on BMG 31 die. Let's wait for the official reveal to find out. Now, I don't think that this BMG G31 die will ever make it to the consumer market. If it does, it will be in a very low stock special edition limited launch type of scenario that I would see that ever happen. But outside of that, I don't think it will ever see the light of day in the consumer segment. How long is this one? I'm not a big fan of Alienware, but we can have a look at this. Alienware's new Aurora laptops are for gamers who crave some design subtlety. Having a look at this looks like a very basic laptop design, which is very much appreciated, because something that I didn't really like about Alienware, at least in the desktop segment, was the very unique, to say, I'll put that in quotes, a very unique look. And it wasn't unique in a good way, because it meant that things were really not standardized in terms of the components that they use and the design of the components and the layout of the components. So it was very difficult to add certain upgrades to some Alienware desktops, and I can imagine the same thing being for Alienware laptops. And I do prefer more subtle designs. I'm honestly not an RGB enthusiast, so to speak. I can appreciate some RGB designs, but for my personal PC, I don't really have much interest in RGB. And looking at mini PCs also changed that, which already shifted me closer to Noctua as is. But having used Noctua, I've probably joined the side of Noctua effectively permanently for at least a couple of years, until another company outperforms Noctua to an extremely noticeable level. But man, my first Noctua fan setup was, to be frank, it was night and day. It was like a third eye opened in PC cooling for me, because I didn't even imagine that Noctua was as quiet as they are. I always thought it was overhyped with how quiet people would say their GPUs are. Not GPUs, their fans are, and their coolers are, but having used them now, they are so quiet. And I'm looking forward to new Noctua products. and I even plan on doing an upgrade on my mini PC if it's repairable. Everything with asterisks if that mini PC is repairable. If it's not repairable, then I will probably wait for a different mini PC to come out, specifically a mini PC with USB 4 version 2, because I want to get off of so I don't mind Oculink. Oculink is perfectly fine, but the problem with Oculink is that if you disconnect the cable mid usage, there's a chance that you can damage your motherboard or the eGPU dock PCB. There's a chance that you can cause damage to those, and there's a chance that it can be an expensive fix if it's fixable, with an asterisk of if it's even fixable. So unlike Oculink, USB 4 doesn't suffer from that weakness. So I would like to switch over to USB 4 version 2 when it releases, because I'll be completely honest, the bandwidth is honestly what I'm looking at, and I'm not really, I wouldn't say that I'm not in favor of either or, I'm just not loyal to either or type of connectivity, if I'm being completely honest. I will easily recommend either or if Oculink 2.0 was to release, and this is a 120 gigabyte per second bandwidth that you get, then I would recommend that over the 80 gigabyte per second USB 4 almost all the time, because at the end of the day, eGPUs suffer from bandwidth issues. So one of the reasons why they don't recommend something like a 4080 or a 5080 or a 4090 and 5090, they don't recommend those GPUs. They recommend one in the line of a 4070 to 4070 Super. Sometimes you can argue for 4070 Ti and a 4070 Ti Super, but it's usually not along those lines, especially in the docks. As far as the power delivery is concerned, they always recommend a 4070. So everything about that shows that they spec everything based on the bandwidth that is available. And unfortunately, going much higher end would lead you to being bandwidth bottlenecked. Also, part of the weakness of USB 4 is that it has a translation layer, whereas Oculink is a direct PCIe connection. The only difference would be the NVMe slot that you if you go the NVMe route, which NVMe slot you use, because going with that, with the direct to C, the NVMe that has the most direct connection to the CPU, you would benefit from the bandwidth benefits, because you'll get the bandwidth priority. But let me actually get into this. I want to see the specs of this Alienware laptop. I hope it has USB 5, because not USB 5, Thunderbolt 5, because Thunderbolt 5 is okay, I got a message now at school, so that means I got another hold on, let me have a look at this, because I just got a message that is pretty important. And either I have not been part of the CC of this email, or it is on a different email. Let me have a look. Let me get to you. There's nothing here. We can go to spam. There's nothing in the spam. There's a chance that this is just based on the class group chat that I left. And it's ironic that because I was speaking about the licensing post-college, and now I'm at home for this period of time. It seems like I'll be at home until July. A friend of mine spoke to a contact in the South African Nursing Council. Either way, I was expecting upwards of August 2025 to be licensed. So anything before that would be a pleasant surprise. But ultimately, when it comes to anything to do with any form of a regulatory body, I don't expect things to go quickly because they tend to be extremely bloated. And it seems like my friend is typing up a paragraph. Okay, so that's just someone else in the class that said something about that. Which is fine because I left that class group a long time ago. Basically, as soon as the results of whether or not we completed the course came out and I saw I completed the course, I left the class group. And I told my friends, if you guys see any updates, just send it my way. Alright, let me get started on this now. Detour aside, Alienware is typically known for sci-fi focused spaceship inspired designs, but its new Aurora, the laptops, the Dell subsidiary, is going for a bit more subtlety. In time for PAX East, Alienware is launching the Alienware 16 Aurora and Alienware 16X Aurora systems that blend understated for Alienware designs with gaming power. It feels like a successor to last year's Alienware M16R2, which dialed down the gaming looks and added a stealth mode for quiet performance and plain lighting, and that feature is coming back with the Auroras. And I like this design. It's a clean design, right? But gaming laptops run hot. So I want to know how they call these behemoths. Both Auroras come in dark blue, interstellar indigo chassis that feature the alien head logo on the lid, but a little less that screams gaming notebook. They have curved edges designed to be comfortable to pick up and carry, and can also be opened with one hand. I want to see the hinge test. Okay, looking at the specs, it's not bad. It's really not bad specs. To be fair, I'll give it that. It's not bad specs. But man, 720p really. I want to know the price of the Alienware 16 Aurora. That I at least give the, what is it, 768 or something like that. The resolution in between 720p and oh no, it's the webcam. Ooh. I was like, okay, cool, okay, never mind. It's a 1600 by 2560. It's a 2560 by 1600 pixel display, so that's good. It's on both. It's 16-inch on both laptops. Okay, whew. It's 120 Hertz on the 16 Aurora, and the 16X Aurora is on 240 Hertz. So that's the specs I wanted to look at. That's honestly all. I wonder what the battery life is like. What kind of battery did they say they have? So the non-X variant comes with a 60 watt hour or a 96 watt hour battery, and the X variant comes with a 96 watt hour battery. I would say go with the non-X. You'll get a slightly slower CPU, and you'll get... Okay, this also depends on pricing. The Aurora X is $1,949 US, and the non-X variant is $1,149 US, and this is starting with the RTX 4050. And the X variant starts with a 5060. In all honesty, I would say your configuration should be 5060. Take the Alienware 16 Aurora, get the 5060 variant. You'll probably still be paying under $1,800 US if you go with that configuration. Now, to be fair, you're probably going to have... You'll probably have less storage, 1 terabyte less storage, but you can always just buy another NVMe SSD for cheaper. Let's have a look. So it has Thunderbolt 4. And it does not have Thunderbolt 4 on the non-X variant. You know what? Never mind. The X variant might actually be worth it depending on your needs. Because Thunderbolt 4 is honestly very much a... It is a purchase-worthy feature on a laptop. Let's have a look at the next 3 articles. I think I can drop this XeSS in 200 games article because we already went over something similar to that. And the stream has been going on for 2 hours and 14 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up soon because I have lunch that I need to sort out for myself. Nvidia celebrates dumping of Biden-era AI chip export rules. Simply new policy is promised. So the Trump administration intends to cancel the AI diffusion rule export control policy, reports Bloomberg. And this policy restricts shipments of advanced AI processors to all but 19 countries around the world, and was introduced under the President Biden administration in January. Details about the revised policy are unclear, but it is believed to focus on country-by-country negotiations over broad global rules, while continuing strict controls on China. Despite the lack of new detail, Nvidia is already celebrating. The Biden AI rule is overly complex, overly bureaucratic, and would stymie American innovation, a statement from the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security published by Bloomberg reads. We will be replacing it with a much simpler rule that unleashes American innovation and ensures American AI dominance. The regulation in question, known as the AI diffusion rule, was set to take effect on May 15th, excuse me, and would have categorized foreign nations into 3 groups for licensing purposes. Under the system, only the US and 18 allied Tier 1 countries have full access to processors like Nvidia's H100. Over 100 Tier 2 nations would face a cap of around 50,000 H100 class GPUs annually over the next few years, unless they obtain verified end-user status. Note that entities in Tier 2 nations may still import up to 1,000 advanced AI processors per year without a license, which would not count towards the cap. Tier 3 countries such as China, Russia, and Macau would be barred from getting advanced processors entirely due to arms embargoes. A new bilateral approach will be taken. Trump officials, however, will not implement the above framework. Instead, they are creating a new approach focused on bilateral arrangements with countries such as Saudi Arabia and the South Arab Emirates. To get advanced GPUs, such countries may have to invest in the US or broaden diplomatic cooperation, according to the report. For example, nations like UAE have advocated for looser rules and have committed to long-term US technology investment, pledging as much as $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. Until recently, the UAE had to obtain an export license from the US government to obtain advanced AI processors such as Nvidia's H100 and H200 chips. While the Trump team seeks to revise global export rules for AI processors, it has reinforced restrictions against China's access to advanced AI GPUs designed in the US, including AMD's Instinct MI308 and Nvidia's H20. As a result, the two companies have to write down billions worth of AI processors in the most recent quarter. It is unlike that the US government lifts a ban on these processors, but Nvidia is already celebrating the fact that AI diffusion rule is gone. As a result, it can continue shipping its AI and HPC GPUs to Europe without any restrictions. We welcome the administration's leadership and the new direction on AI policy, a statement from Nvidia reads. With the AI diffusion rule revoked, America will have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to lead the industrial revolution and create high-paying US jobs, build new US supply infrastructure, and elevate the trade deficit. Nvidia has argued that controlling sales to non-Chinese nations could alienate allies and drive them to China's Huawei AI ecosystem, thus threatening US leadership in the AI sector in the long term. The change may also benefit US firms with global infrastructure ambitions. For example, Oracle's expansion plans in Malaysia face potential obstacles under the prior rule due to shipment caps. However, keeping in mind the fact that the Trump administration has strict stance against China, it is possible that it may curb sales of advanced GPUs to countries used to smuggle Nvidia's H100 processors and servers to China, which includes Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. The problem with restricting nations that smuggle to China is that they'll just find other nations to smuggle from. That will always be a cat and mouse game when it comes to smuggling, where one will one up the other every single time. Let me have a look. Harmony OS is replacing Windows on Huawei laptops and delivers connectivity across the ecosystem. This is probably one of the biggest wins for a Huawei laptop user. And the reason why I say that is because no longer do you have to rely on Windows, and no longer do you have to suffer under the how do I put this? Oh, I can't get to the term now. My mind is completely blanking out on this word. The inconvenience of Windows. They can keep everything in Huawei, and if you are the type of person that tries to keep to one brand when it comes to your devices, you would be in a much better position to effectively manage your devices, because you'll have one ecosystem that you can utilize. Because unfortunately, if you're on Windows, you have Windows, you probably have iOS maybe, or you have Android. And if you're on Apple, honestly, that ecosystem, like, as much as I tend to hate on the closed ecosystem of Apple, I can appreciate how convenient the closed ecosystem is. Like, if you have a MacBook and you have an iPad, it's easy to connect the two, transfer files between the two, set up screen sharing, screen extending, file transfers. Everything is almost seamless with the two. Same thing with an iPhone. If you have an iPhone and you have a MacBook or an iPad, it's all seamless. And I hope that Huawei can replicate something as seamless as that, but we'll have to read further, and this article is not that long in all honesty, so I'll probably read the whole thing. Looking at stream time, we are 2 hours and 22 minutes. That is chunky for a stream. I usually only do 1 hour streams. Huawei's license to use Microsoft Windows expired last March, and it's unable to renew its contract with the software giant due to US sanctions against the company. Instead, Chinese tech giant launched Harmony OS and its replacement for the desktop operating system from Redmond. According to South China Morning Post, the company showed off a yet-to-be-named laptop running Harmony OS 5, sometimes called Harmony OS Next, the latest version of Huawei's operating system. The laptop is set for an official launch later this month. The operating system has been in development since 2012, and it first hit Huawei devices in 2019 on a Vision Smart TV. By 2021, Huawei started deploying it in its smartphones, with older mobiles getting the homegrown operating system too. Most Huawei laptops come with Windows 11, although the company has also offered some models that use Linux, which is open source. By relying on its own operating system allows it to create an ecosystem of devices. This is especially true as it already has several other devices running Harmony OS, from smart TVs and laptops to tablets and smartphones running the same software. This will make it easier for the company to market its devices as one seamless platform, similar to how Apple does with iOS and iPad OS and Mac OS. Harmony OS powered Huawei smartphones have already overtaken Apple in China, with the former achieving 19% market share over the latter 17% last quarter. This will likely make it more enticing for Chinese consumers to switch to Harmony OS for their desktop or laptop computing needs. Apps for Harmony OS include WPS Office, a free substitute to the Microsoft Office suite. WPS Office, to my knowledge, is a paid service. I've had friends that use it and they've had so many ads. I would just say use Google Docs, Google Slides and all that. Use the Google environment to your advantage when you have access to it. And DingTalk, an enterprise collaboration system which reportedly works on the laptop. The PC is also expected to natively run the thousands of mobile apps that are already available for Harmony OS smartphones. That is cool to see if the laptop is able to do that. We don't yet know the specs of the Harmony OS powered Huawei computer, but if it uses an Intel or AMD chip like other laptops in its lineup, there's a chance that users who need Windows can install it after purchase. They might even be able to dual boot it, allowing them to stick to temporarily use Windows for the apps they need but aren't available yet on Harmony OS. And that is one thing that is limiting me from going to Linux. So effectively what I want for Linux is, I'm having a drop in the bandwidth and it seems to be increasing again and it's fluctuating. Oh, alright, I think things settled. No, I'm still dropping frames. Trying to get things to settle down. Okay, I think things have settled for the bandwidth now. Okay, cool. Getting back into this, one of the things that's keeping me from Linux is the support of certain apps that I just need to figure out if Linux even supports those, because if it does, I will make the switch to Linux very quickly, because at the end of the day, I prefer to have a more lightweight desktop experience. You know what? If I'm being completely honest, I'll probably have to reduce the bitrate a bit more on the stream. I wonder if I can do so. I don't think I can while I'm streaming. It's possible, but it's probably not gonna happen. Okay, never mind, I think I can. Let's go 3,500. We do that. If it means because it will probably be much easier to maintain this bandwidth across both of the across both streaming platforms. It might be better for me to do that. And it does look like I am able to. And let me just have a look on my phone. We are already around 2 hours into this. This is insane that it's going on for this long, if I'm being completely honest. Okay, everything looks good. So let's move on to the next article, the final article. Because that was a ton of frames that I dropped actually. It's almost 1% of the frames of the entire stream. In any case, there are some fluctuations in the bitrate, but it seems to be more maintainable. But yeah, this is just the experience of starting out streaming, honestly. Like, I haven't done any long streams before. I have done a 2-hour stream, but I haven't gone far beyond 2 hours. And the RTX 5060 reviews are reportedly in jeopardy. Nvidia allegedly withholding pre-release drivers from reviews. So I have seen a video from XeSS addressing this, where they will only receive drivers on the launch day, which would mean that by the time everything is on the shelves, there will be no drivers available. To my knowledge, they have the GPUs, but they're just paperweights at this point because there's no drivers to use them. So what I think is probably going to happen is that when they do finally do the reviews, the 5060 will be a bad product. I am assuming this is what will come out from it. It will not be a good product. It might be decent at best, and that's me being extremely generous, but it will fundamentally be a bad product. Do I even go over this? How long is this article? Yeah, that's not that long. Okay, so reports from multiple independent reviewers and publications suggest that Nvidia is buying against a pre-release driver for the upcoming budget-oriented RTX 5060. Apparently, Nvidia is dropping drivers for the RTX 5060 GPUs with the retail embargo. Egos Lab, Hardware Lux, and Hardware Unboxed have already posted about the issue on their websites or social media. Without the drivers, proper day one reviews from tech publications will be impossible, and the drivers will drop as many reviewers travel to Computex in Taipei. Nvidia typically optimized pre-release drivers as part of the new kit. Nvidia typically releases the public-facing enablement drivers for a new GPU on the day of its retail launch. If proper drivers aren't installed, the system may either fail to detect the GPU, or the results obtained from benchmarking the card will be unreliable at best. The only solution I can see is that people start streaming the review or the testing process, because at that point there's no embargo on the review, so they might as well stream it, or while they are in Taipei at Computex, they'll have someone at home base that is doing the live stream reviews. Hopefully that's something that can happen. Nvidia didn't send RTX 5060 Ti 8GB models to reviewers, leading them to acquire retail units at their own expense. As expected, that GPU struggles at 4K and 1440p and even 1080p in a handful of titles compared to its 16GB sibling. The RTX 5060 and its 8GB may face similar woes, but that's at least somewhat counteracted by its cheaper price point. It's conceivable that internal software issues may be causing driver delays. If you want to give Nvidia the benefit of the doubt, can confirm. For us, this has the implications that we will not be able to test the RTX 5060 on May 19th because almost the whole team will be at Computex. This also means no testing for the Computex week. Not only bad for us, but above for all consumers. The RTX 5060 is set to hit shelves on May 19th, exactly one day before the Computex kicks off. This leaves reviewers with virtually no time for independent testing, so day one impressions will largely be based on Nvidia's first-party metrics and a few reviewers who didn't travel. Ironically, potential RTX 5060 supply constraints at launch might be a blessing in disguise this time around, giving buyers just enough time to see independent reviews before jumping the gun. On paper, the RTX 5060 offers 25% more CUDA cores than the 4060, suggesting a noticeable performance uplift. At a suggested $299 MSRP, the RTX 5060 might be a decent pick as long as you're aware of its limitations. Further down the stack, Nvidia is reportedly comparing an RTX 5050, but based on early specifications, doesn't expect to perform any miracles. At some point, rumors alleged AMD is also scheduling its budget RTX 5060 series for Computex, reigniting the company's rivalry on the low end of the hardware stack. Now, depending on the release date of the RX 9060 XT, it would likely get a review, and more than just a review, it would probably not get a recommendation. It would probably not get a definitive recommendation until the 5060 releases, because at the end of the day, the RX 9060 8GB will probably be the RTX 5060 non-TI competitor. That is my assumption, and that would probably be a definite if there is no RX 9060 non-XT. And that ends every article that I'll be covering for this morning. I'll stream again in the afternoon. I'm gonna take a bit of a lunch break and then look at some other articles that's available. But other than that, I'll catch you guys later today, probably in 4 to 5 hours from now in the next stream. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.